Hello and welcome to the Sustainable Solutions webinar series, brought to you by the Master of Science in Energy, Policy and Climate program, the Master of Science in Environmental Sciences and Policy program, and the Johns Hopkins University Office of Advanced Academic Programs. Today's event features a discussion on climate and faith or faith in climate. Please note today's event will be recorded and uploaded to the AAP YouTube channel under the Sustainable Solutions playlist. During the program, if you have any questions, please feel free to use the Q&A function, and we will answer as many questions as possible during the latter portion of the event. With that, I will turn over the presentation to our moderator, Lama Elhatow, Program Coordinator and Lecturer for the Master of Science in Energy, Policy and Climate program, and the Master of Science in Environmental Sciences and Policy program.
Just a warm welcome. My name is Dr. Lama Elhatow. As mentioned, I'm the program coordinator and lecturer in the master's program for environmental science and policy and energy policy and climate. This is a part of the Sustainable Solutions Speaker Series that we host once a month with my colleagues, David Guggenheim and Rachel Isaacs, who are with us also to assist me and support me in this process. So I'm super grateful for that. What we'll do in today's lecture, in today's webinar, we're actually really grateful to be able to have some incredible panelists to talk to us today about the intersection of climate change and faith. And this is a really interesting and I think very timely topic. If a lot of you were in DC today, you'd notice actually we had the walk of the Buddhist monks that were walking for peace right in front of the DC campus for Johns Hopkins today. And it was as they're walking through, making sure that was something very symbolic. This was a very timely webinar to be able to also commemorate that. So that's one thing that we're very honored to be able to have some of these great panelists with us today to talk about this intersection of faith and faith-based communities when they talk about peace and climate change and many of these issues that are impending today. With religions and faith communities, they play a vital role in promoting climate resilience by fostering a sense of stewardship and responsibility towards the earth. Many spiritual traditions emphasize this interconnectedness of all living beings and advocate for the protection of creation, viewing nature as a sacred trust. So interfaith dialogue can serve as a powerful platform for sharing these perspectives, uniting diverse beliefs in the pursuit of a common goal, which is, of course, environmental sustainability. So by collaborating across faiths, communities can leverage their moral teachings to inspire action, to encourage sustainable practices, and to mobilize collective efforts to address climate change, thereby reinforcing this idea that caring for our planet is in fact an essential part of spiritual life. So in today's webinar, we're going to talk about with three panelists from various faiths on the significance of environmental stewardship for climate resilience in our communities. We will begin and start off with Dr. Joyce Biggins, who is an environmental scientist, a sustainability expert, and newly awarded PhD graduate from Erasmus University Rotterdam's Faculty of Social and Behavioral Sciences, where her research focused on leadership, faith actors, and community flood resilience. For more than 4 decades, she served at the US EPA Region 6, leading major initiatives in sustainability, disaster recovery, environmental compliance, and federal-state partnerships. Her work included advising FEMA after the 2016 Louisiana floods, coordinating renewable energy and climate resilience projects, and developing national-level strategies to improve environmental performance across federal facilities. Dr. Biggins has also served as an adjunct professor at Southern Methodist University, where she created and taught graduate courses on sustainability, climate change, and environmental management. She's published in journals and contributed book chapters on sustainability in faith-based organizations in environmental leadership. And she's very much interested in this intersection between faith, climate change, and resilient communities, as well as drawing on her academic research and decades of field research in the space of climate change and faith. With that, we move to Jenny, Rabbi Jenny Rosen, who is the CEO and founder of Dianu, which was founded in 2020 to mobilize the American Jewish community to confront the climate crisis with spiritual audacity and bold political action. The organization has since grown exponentially and now mobilizes thousands of Jewish climate activists. Rabbi Rosen has twice been named one of the Forward's 50 most influential Jews in America, and in 2022 was named one of the top 22 faith leaders to watch by the Center for American Progress. Rabbi Rosen has spent more than 2 decades leading Jewish nonprofit organizations, advocating for social change and creating dynamic new initiatives at the heart of the Jewish social justice movement. Before founding Dianu, she served as vice president for community engagement at HIAS, where she brought a robust Jewish movement responding to global refugee crisis. She spent over a decade also growing the Jewish social justice movement as the director of Jewish Life and Values program at the Nathan Cummings Foundation. And there she built the Jewish Social Justice Roundtable and the SELA Leadership Training Program, which spearheaded initiatives to cultivate environmental movements and women as agents of change in Israel. Rabbi Rosen has also served as rabbi at Columbia, Bernard Hill, a founding board member at Avoda, the Jewish Service Corps, and Repair the World, and on the boards of the Jewish Funders Network and New York Jobs with Justice. Rabbi Rosen was ordained by Hebrew Union College Jewish Institute of Religion, where she was a Wexner Graduate Fellow. She and her husband, David, live in New York City, where they raised their 2 sons. Thank you so much for being with us. And our third panelist, we have Kori Majeed, who finds her happy place at the intersection. Pardon me, the lights keep coming off again. Kori, who finds her happy place at the intersection of faith and sustainability, where every tree, stream, and star is a sign pointing back to Allah. Since 2013, she has led Green Ramadan, a platform reminding Muslims that fasting isn't just about abstaining from food. It's about feeding the soul while caring for the planet. And while we're on the brink of the holy month of Ramadan, that's actually coming up and starting next week, that's actually quite timely. Rooted in Islamic teachings, her work highlights the call to honor all of Allah's creations, from native plants and pollinators to the waterways that sustain us. Kori is a Maryland Master Naturalist, chair of the Green team at Masjid Muhammad, the nation's mosque, and co-author of 40 Green Hadiths, sayings of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, on environmental justice and sustainability. In 2022, she and her husband Ishaq completed master's degrees in Islamic Studies at Bayan Islamic Graduate School. Kori is also a homeschooling mom and Girl Scout troop leader. Fueled by a passion for seeking knowledge, she currently pursues a teacher certification with the Ribaat Academic Institute, preparing to help raise the next generation of Muslims who connect with Allah through his signs in the natural world and deeply love the Prophet, peace be upon him, who is a mercy to all of its creation. Thank you so much, 3 of you, for being with us. I'm so grateful to have the 3 of you. The order of how we'll proceed with this webinar today is we will start off with Joyce, who will be speaking for a bit, and then we'll have Jenny, and then we'll have Kori, and then we'll open it up to the audience with a series of questions that we'll moderate for the remainder of that period. With that, Joyce, I'll like to give the floor to you.
All right. Thank you so much, Lama. I really appreciate it and looking forward to it. Just want to share a few comments based on my doctoral research at Erasmus University, where I looked at faith in climate action and community resilience through the lens of leadership that's addressing the needs of the community. And one of the things that, just in my opening, I like to say that leadership isn't located in one person or institution. So that's something to think about. In climate disasters, it emerges through relationships. And in particular, in my case, I looked at the Louisiana floods. There were 2 historic floods that occurred in the same year in 2016. And of course, then we had Hurricane Harvey, which followed up in 2017. So at that, I looked at the intersection of faith, policy, and universities as well, including governments. Framing this reality, climate recovery is not just technical as we may want to think about it. It's actually, recovery is relational. After disasters, what we have trust that's strained. We have people asking questions like, who do we trust? Who shows up? Who's going to help us make sense of what just happened to us? So faith enters as a trusted anchor, not a policy driver. Yes, formal plans and resources matter, but are not enough on their own. They gain that traction when the community is bought in and the community buys in. A core insight, I would say, is that particular leadership doesn't belong to one sector or climate language. Climate language may not even show up. It emerges through interactions, connectedness, procedures, resources. And here, faith holds the human side, and policy and practice moves us forward. I'd like to just quickly show a slide figure in which is to model that where resilience sits, where people and plans and resources overlap, all of which are highly important. And faith, in particular, contributes through trust and sustained presence. Faith doesn't replace institutions, it connects them to the lived experiences of the people through participation, and is very critical and something that we need to bring to the forefront of that, having the faith community to participate. Thank you so much on that one. The results are sort of what emerged. Leadership is cyclical. It's not linear, top down. I give the command and you follow. It's distributed and it's often informal. Faith leaders are also affected. They are also vulnerable. Their congregations are vulnerable to the same floods, the same fires, the same climate impacts. But their role is relational and not authoritative. What mattered most was credibility, continuity. They're going to be there for the people, and connections. Some of the most influential moments occurred outside of formal decision-making spaces, such as community meetings where people are concerned about the issues, the compounded issues that occur after a flood disaster. There are already complications within communities that they're dealing with and trying to address. Add a flood disaster, for example, on top of that. Connecting with governments and universities and informal conversations that happen. I mean, what matters most was not a title or expertise or relational credibility, because after relational credibility, everything else falls in place. Who people trusted, who stayed present, and who could bridge lived experience with institutional systems, faith community can do such a thing. I found one thing that I thought was really neat to see. Can you imagine a student from one university in conversation at the board talking about ecosystem services and recovery with a professor from another university at the board, thinking, how can we be better? What we need to do together. So these are things that we want to pay attention to. And why this matters is because climate recovery depends on trust, long-term engagement, and leadership beyond funding, because there are tangibles and intangibles that have to be addressed. Faith communities often remain when others step back. Then continuity is operational. This is not just symbolic, it is actually operational. This is making a difference in people's lives. And in closing, I'd like to say that faith in climate action isn't theology driving the policy, it's recognizing where leadership actually emerges, bridging people in policy. And resilience requires shared relational leadership. Again, not just top down, but a shared relational leadership. It's about community, quality of life. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Joyce. That was incredibly timely and very, very much necessary. Thank you for that.
Thank you, Lama.
If I can ask you to mute your just for the sake for the background, mute your microphone. Thanks so much. I think with that we will move to Jenny and give you the floor.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Isaacs and Elhatow, Dr. Elhatow, and to the Johns Hopkins Sustainable Solutions series. It's really very special that you're including faith perspectives in this series. And I'm really honored to be here with Dr. Biggins and Kori. So when I started Dayenu, a Jewish call to climate action, a little less than 6 years ago, some people asked me, why do we need a Jewish climate organization? My rabbinate over the last 30 years has really been focused on mobilizing the American Jewish community to address issues of social and economic justice. And we know that the climate crisis is not only a massive existential issue of our time, it's also at its core a social, economic, and racial justice issue. But the question that was posed to me, not infrequently in those early days, was why a Jewish climate organization? What's Jewish about climate? Why do we need a Jewish response? And my response then was that there are many answers to this question. I suppose that's a very rabbinic response. But for starters, there are many Jewish values that call us to rise to the challenge of the climate crisis. There's some classic values like Shomrei Adama, protecting the earth, and Bal Tashchit, the prohibition to waste, but also values like B'charta B'chaim, choose life, Tirdof Tzedek, pursue justice, and Shomer Ger Yatom V'Almanah, protect the vulnerable. And really, at its most basic, addressing the climate crisis is about the very concept of living L'dor Vador, from generation to generation. Will the generations continue? And what kind of lives will they have? So these are just a few of the core values, but there are other reasons for a Jewish communal response. This is a diverse movement, the climate movement, of people fighting for climate justice. There includes faith groups and Black and Brown and Indigenous communities and young people. We need every single part of the diverse American community, including the Jewish community. This is an all hands on deck moment. And I don't think anyone or any community can sit this out. So Dayenu organizes Jews with nearly 100 Dayenu circles around the country. These are small groups of Jews taking action on climate, together with other local faith and climate groups, very much as part of the larger movement. Engaging in any number of Dayenu strategic campaigns. And we really focus on systemic approaches to address the climate crisis. So federal and state policy, changing the political landscape by getting out the climate vote, keeping fossil fuels in the ground and unburned, and stopping the flow of money that keeps the industry afloat. And we build grassroots leadership and really stand in solidarity with frontline communities. And I think that there is power in spiritually rooted climate action. So in our community, we bring Jewish history and experience and teachings and tradition and faith and song to the movement. It's not just a series of like tactics, but how do we really build a movement that's rooted in community and in spirit, sustaining ourselves and each other for the work ahead? And I think many peoples, and I would include Jews in here, have faced existential crisis and disruption and destruction many times throughout history. And each time we've not only survived, but we've envisioned and rebuilt a different kind of future. Each time we've had to create a very new kind of existence. And I believe that is the moment that we are in right now. The climate crisis, it's not only a political or ecological or even social justice issue. I think it is also an issue of the soul. And we need to be supporting people to live with greater wholeness, attending to the spiritual issues that are raised by the crisis. So in the Jewish climate movement, we create climate Torah and new Jewish climate music and arts, and opportunities for folks to come together and really make space for the very painful feelings that the climate crisis raises, to cultivate active hope, and this is important, to move into courageous action. So over these past years of building with many others a Jewish climate movement and working as part of the larger multi-faith and secular climate movements, my belief in the power of Jewish and faith-rooted climate activism has only grown. So I want to add just a few additions to my initial answers to the question of why. And I want to frame it a little bit more broadly. Why faith-rooted climate work? Why do we need faith-rooted climate movement? Why do we need faith-rooted climate work? So this moment that we're in history demands nothing less, I think, than bold, transformational action. And everyone has a role to play. There's a role for scientists, and there's a role for engineers, and there's a role for politicians, and there's a role for philanthropists, and there's a role for academics, and there is a role for religious leaders and religious communities. We need, I would say, maybe even first and foremost, a moral voice. We need to be lifting up a clear moral call that centers values like the absolute equal worth of every single human being, the right to clean air and water and food and shelter, the right to protect, not sacrifice those who are most vulnerable. We need a moral voice that means like asking whose lives are we centering in our solutions? Because we know that the impacts of the climate crisis rest disproportionately on those who've been historically marginalized. People living in the global South, in poverty, in particularly vulnerable areas, people who've experienced racism and other kinds of bigotry. I sometimes think about the climate crisis as like a force multiplier. It exacerbates historical inequities, even as it impacts everyone. So raising a moral voice, I think also means, and this might be a little controversial, I also think it means not being afraid to name evil. We know the fossil fuel industry and those who do its bidding are the Goliaths of our time. And I think we must not hesitate to say so loudly, clearly, without caveat. I think we need to really lead with moral courage. And while that's certainly not the realm only of faith communities, I think that religious voices excel at this. So that's one. Two, our religious traditions remind us that a different world is possible and hold out a vision for that world. We're in a time that requires, I think, nothing less than radical imagination, because we need to not only fight the bad, we also need to envision and build a completely different future, one in which we honor our earth and we honor each other and we recognize our profound interconnection, a world in which we care for each other and where all people can live with dignity and meaning. And this is the stuff of our traditions, visions of what a just and vibrant society can look like. And in this time when doom and despair, I think, can really easily reign, when a lack of moral imagination is all too easy, part of our work, part of the work of faith, is to remind people that a different world is possible. Three, and there are only four of these, so I will wrap up soon. On a practical level, faith communities are like critical bases for building and leveraging power with political leaders. Name almost any major successful social movement, faith communities were part of it, sometimes even at the center. And I think we have a unique role to play in inspiring and empowering people to move from overwhelm to collective action. Which brings me to the fourth role of faith, which is spiritual resourcing. I mentioned this before, but I think it bears going a little bit deeper, because the climate crisis is devastating. The suffering that millions are already experiencing, it can be too much to bear. The psychological and spiritual dread that we feel when we face what is at stake, the fact that without massive change, we are hurtling towards a world that will be uninhabitable. There will not be enough food to eat, clean air to breathe, or water to drink. There'll be major cities underwater. It's like it's too hard for our souls and psyches to bear such a painful possibility. And so many people, understandably, turn away. Unable to face the truth, we sort of disassociate. In some ways, it's a different form of climate change denial, if you will. And many of us despair, some give up. And so we need to be building a spiritually rooted climate movement that supports people across generations, across communities, to face the truth, not alone. And this is really important. And this is also where faith communities come in community, and to make space for grief and anxiety, and also to offer practices to support people that are rooted in our traditions, in our sacred texts and liturgy and ritual and song, practices that cultivate active hope and support people to move into courageous action. Sadly, I will say that I think supporting people in the face of climate destruction and the truth of this time is going to become more and more a part of what it means to be a religious community, as climate realities become more and more. But this is not only a treacherous time. I want to close by saying I think it's also a time of real possibility. And I'll just end by sharing why we named the organization that I lead Dainu, because I think it reflects this sort of dual reality of urgency and possibility. So Dainu is a joyous song of gratitude that Jews sing at the Passover Seder, when we're retelling the story of our people's journey from slavery to freedom. And it recounts all the things that God has done for us. So it says, like, if God had taken us out of Egypt, but not given us the Torah, Dainu, it would have been enough. If God has given us the Torah, but not given us manna in the desert, Dainu, it would have been enough, and so on. But it can also be translated as, we've had enough. We've had enough climate destruction. We've had enough valuing fossil fuel companies over human life. We've had enough letting the impacts of climate destruction fall disproportionately on Black, Brown, Indigenous, poor, and marginalized communities. Dainu. But this is where the double entendre comes in, because it can also mean we have enough. We have what we need to confront the climate crisis and move towards climate solutions. We have the resources, we have the policy rubrics, we have the technology, we have what we need so that everyone can have enough. So now is really the time for us to join together across communities, across faiths, in this very urgent and sacred work.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Jenny. Incredibly timely. And I love that definitely this idea of collective action is where we need to be headed. Thank you so much for that. I will open up the floor for Kori. Kori, the floor is all yours.
All right. Thank you so much. And thank you for this invitation. And this is so cool because Dr. Biggin spoke about how leadership happens in different types of people. And so I'm on a panel with a PhD and a rabbi, and I'm not with an organization, although I collab with them. But I call my work is like my personal charity to my community. So that's great. And Rabbi Rosen was like, this is an all hands on deck moment. So what does Islam say about, climate? What would Muhammad, peace and blessing be upon him, do? When work is rooted in faith, it works as a spiritual resource that keeps us hopeful, and it's rewarded, in this life and the next. So I want people to know, what do Muslims have to say about this? Because Islam is a growing religion in this country and in the world. A lot of people still don't know. A lot of people still don't know about Muslim or Islam. So what does Islam say? So there are like 4 main points that I'm going to try to get. Let me set my timer right now. There are 4 main points that I'm trying to get in this, that 4 concepts that are essential to the discussion on stewardship and responsibility toward the earth in Islam. And the first one is balance. In Arabic, it's mizan, and it means harmony, equity, fairness, and it's in our book. And balance is a part of the divine order of the universe, and it's part of our moral architecture. So humanity is warned not to disrupt the balance in the Quran. So environmental care, it's more than a lifestyle choice for us. It's a part of our worship. Allah tells us what to do, and Allah tells us what to stay away from. So this is part of our worship. And so when we harm the ecosystem, it's not just being wasteful. It's like a spiritual violation of the harmony in Allah's majestic design of the entire cosmos. So and the next point, well, I'm doing it. I'm killing this. Okay, humans are trustees. We're not owners. And in Arabic, that word is khalifa. So Allah, it's a role that's given to humans from God. So God has given us the role of Khalifa, or trustees or caretakers of the earth. And so a Khalifa manages something that does not belong to them. And we're going to answer for how we treated the earth. So let me see, a quick story. the quick story. This is in the Quran. Allah is talking to the angels and saying, I'm going to make upon the earth a khalifa, a successive authority, a vicegerent. And the angels are like, you're going to place on the earth something that's going to cause corruption and shed blood. But we're here and we're exalting you. We praise you. And Allah says, I know what you don't know. And so when I start to lose hope that, okay, Muslims, are we going to change our ways? I think of this verse from Quran, and it gives me hope. I don't know how things are going to turn out, but I'm still going to do the work. But Allah knows. All right. So, and then there's another verse that we read in the Quran, supposed to read it every Friday from Surah Kaf. Indeed, we have made that which is on the earth adornment for it, that we may test them as to which of them is best indeed. So in this ayah of the Quran, in this verse of the Quran, stewardship is tied to judgment and moral responsibility. And in another saying of the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, he said that the world is sweet and green, and verily Allah is going to install you as a khalifa, as a vicegerent, as a steward, in order to see how you act. So we will be asked how we treat these beautiful blessings of the earth. So the earth is not human property, although we exchange money, with each other for it. The earth is a trust from God. So domination is replaced by responsibility and care. And exploitation is replaced by mindful use. And entitlement is replaced by accountability. So, and even if those of us who may not have enough money to buy our own little piece of the earth, we're still called in. Our role is not to just buy until we die. Allah made us Khalifa, caretakers, not consumers. And then this responsibility for care extends to all of the creation. Animals, plants, water, land, our fellow humans. Animals, plants, water, and land, they all have value beyond their usefulness to humans. So in the Quran, Allah affirms the intrinsic value and dignity of non-human life. And there are numerous examples of Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, where he taught mercy towards animals, where he forbade the waste of water, even if you're next to a flowing river, where he linked kindness to all creatures with a spiritual reward. And so just a quick example of that. There was a woman who was a prostitute, and she saw a dog who was like about to die of thirst next to a mouth of a well. And so she took off her shoe, she tied it to her head covering, and she drew some water for it. And on account of that, Allah forgave her. So so Allah forgave a woman because she showed mercy to a thirsty dog. So there's a spiritual reward for kindness to animals and really any living thing. It teaches compassion towards all life, and that's just a prophetic example that's in our religion. So environmental care is a daily ethical practice. Conservation, restraint, and compassion, they're acts of worship and at the heart of Islamic ethics. And so my last point is, this is kind of like on a metaphysical Sufi type tip, is seeing Allah in creation. So preserving the balance in the natural world is more than about ethics and justice. With ethics and justice, we need that. The natural world is also a place to experience with all our senses Allah's divine names. These are like manifestations of Allah's characteristics so that we can get to know him. And so if we're experiencing a natural world, seeing Allah's divine names in creation, we're like filled with awe of our Creator, and we turn back to our Creator with gratitude and increased faith and in obedience. So I guess to put it another way, the natural world is full of signs that point to the one who created us all. And additionally, all of creation praises and exalts Allah in their own way. So Allah has put an instinct in everything to pray to him and glorify him. And so in effect, for example, deforestation, cutting down a community of trees, silences the praise of a group of Allah's worshipers. So I think I'm done. I got my point. So in conclusion, in Islam, earth care is not separate from faith. It's faith in action. There's balance, there's responsibility, there's compassion for all of creation, and it creates a beautiful love triangle between Allah, humanity, and the rest of creation. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kori. That was wonderful. And also the example you gave of the trees being cut down with deforestation, what that means in terms of also praising God is so beautiful. So thank you for that. Thank you, all of you, Joyce, Jenny, Kori, each of you. I would like to welcome all of our attendees to, if you have any questions, to start putting them into the Q&A box, and myself and the rest of the moderators will start also filtering those out. So please go ahead and do so. I am going to take a little bit of an opportunity, since I can, and ask a question of my own right now, if that's possible, to the panelists. And it basically comes down to this idea that we're kind of in this time right now of climate skepticism and climate misinformation, specifically when it comes to communities. My question to all of you is working with faith communities and faith-based communities, how can we utilize faith in order to rectify the climate misinformation and climate skepticism that we're starting to see across the board, not just on a domestic level, both here in the United States, but also on a global level? I'll start with Joyce and then go to Jenny and then Kori.
Thank you so much. Well, one of the things that I was thinking about as you were presenting your question is that when we look at the issues, if you look in just the issues of unethical practices, without someone saying you have to be of this faith or that faith, well, let's think about, we want to be ethical. We want to make sure that what we're doing is okay. Research started looking at this because of some of the bank fraud, some of the things that start happening in the world about, people being taken advantage of. So therefore, we move toward looking at what is ethical and what is not. And actually, these are based in different faiths, without saying, oh, you have to be of this faith or you have to be of that faith or this religion. But these are some basic principles. Don't, be unethical. And here is something that we need to move forward. If others are afraid of so let's say the church and state phenomenon, that we need to move past that and think about, we want to care for our community, and what is the best way to do it? That's where we come together without, being concerned with the idea of the church and state. And I think that causes a lot of people to hold back. Let's not hold back. We need to move forward and seek the truth and seek what really helps others. That is really the bottom line, because guess what? Those people are our family members, our loved ones, our neighbors. We're all in this together. So why not? Why not continue that and do that? So that's kind of how I can try to address that.
Thank you, Joyce. Thanks so much for that. And Dan Zachary, our director for EPC, actually just put in a question very, very similar to the one I just asked, but I'll just build upon that. But he's also mentioning this idea of misinformation, and especially how a lot of people just question this misinformation without using science. So how do we do that? How do we address that with faith? Utilizing a lot of our climate faith leaders by making sure that climate information is also addressed in an appropriate manner. So Jenny, I'll go to you and then Kori.
Yeah, it's such a good question. I think that a lot of people are actually concerned about and are as more and more people experience the impacts of the climate crisis. I think some of it is about connecting the dots and connecting climate to things that people are concerned about, whether that's health or housing or food security or a whole set of issues that intersect with climate and that intersect with their own experience. Their kid has asthma, or they're worried about their house insurance, or, and connecting. I know this sounds very concrete, but I think connecting those dots is one part of it. I also think that, Katharine Hayhoe, who many people I'm sure are familiar with, talks a lot about the importance of conversation about climate. And I think this is also where faith communities and faith leaders can create spaces for those conversations, and to kind of lean in instead of leaning out, which I think also goes to supporting people with the really uncomfortable feelings that it raises. And I think that faith communities, again, have a really unique role to play in supporting people to kind of sit with those really uncomfortable feelings and to resource people through ritual and teaching and spiritual tradition and music, and to be able to sit with it instead of just, like turning their head. And I guess the last thing I'll just say is I think there's often a really strong focus on how do we move the people who don't see it, and that's or don't believe it, or buying into misinformation. I think that's very real, but I also think we need to focus on the people who are concerned but maybe not engaging, and moving them from angst to action. And if all of the people who were concerned were much more engaged, we'd be in a very different place.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for that. Kori, what about you?
So for me, with being a Muslim is really cool because there's like people from all over the world. Like if I go to my local masjid, there's people from um, East Africa, North Africa, West Africa, South Africa, and we got Asia, Bangladesh, whatever. So the reason I'm answering like this is that climate change is devastating for all of creation, but its impacts are unfairly distributed. And a lot of these countries where they're feeling there's no misinformation because they're feeling it, right? A lot of these countries are in the global south where a lot of Muslims have connections to. Even if it's just not, me in particular, it could be, a friend of a friend. I have, friends from all over the world, and they have, friends, back home or whatever. So these people, they're not misinformed. They're feeling it, right? And they're bearing the brunt of the crisis. And so I guess this misinformation is kind of like a problem of the global north because we're not feeling it as much. Well, some communities are not feeling it as much, so they have the comfort of being misinformed. So I think it's important to tell stories, connect with your neighbor, connect with someone of a different faith tradition. So those people who are battling like the disproportionate impacts of climate catastrophes around the world, you can see this. They're not playing. They're not playing about this. This is not just a story. This is like their daily life. So that's how I would address that. Talk to people, communicate. Let's connect.
So on that point, actually, Kori, of connecting, there's a question that was actually directed to you specifically, and it's by Tyler Massius, and he's asking Kori, saying, thank you so much for your words. And he's asking, in this idea of connecting, do you find a particular surah from the Quran that speaks to environmental stewardship and mizan specifically?
Sure. There's so many. I think, okay, I can share something, but I would also like to share like resources, um, which is, where's this book? There's one book that it came out years ago, and the author has now passed. May Allah be pleased with him and have mercy on him. It's called Green Deen: What Islam Teaches About Protecting the Planet. So this is a great resource, but there's also What just recently came out is called Al-Mizan, A Covenant for the Earth, and it's www.almizan.earth. I think I can put it in the chat later, but it's an Islamic outlook on the environment. And also there's 40 Green Hadith. That's something that I and a friend worked on. Sayings of the Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, on environmental justice and sustainability. And so there's so many other resources. So, but let me see, a verse that I like that speaks to it. Uh, I think I mentioned this in my talk. It was one from Surah Kaf, and it's something that we're supposed to read every Friday. Indeed, we have made that which is on the earth adornment for it, that we may test them as to which of them is best indeed. So there's a lot of people love nature because it's beautiful, and it is, but it's also a trust for us. It's also a test for us. And so it's on us to do our best in the area that we live and work and pray and worship.
Thanks so much, Kori. Thank you so much. I appreciate that. With that, I'm going to go to Jasmine, where there's a question that says, thank you so much for your inspiring talk. And she's asking, from your experience, have you found that people are more likely to care about protecting the environment when it's linked to religious mandates or not? Maybe I'll go to Joyce for that question.
Can you repeat that a little bit more for me?
So Jasmine's question is asking when it comes to actually understanding and looking into protecting the environment, do you find that people are more likely to respond and care when it's linked to religious mandate?
I think so. Some of the I'm Methodist. I grew up Methodist, and just the social principles that are aligned with United Methodists, I see includes the air and the ground and the water. Within the church, the ministers are interested in recycling and how they can also better the community. Also, there are I would say like faith groups or green groups that get together to meet to think about how they can ensure that they're following their faith, and protecting the environment and being stewards. And that's on, I would say, like the grassroots level. However, from the denomination, they also look at divesting in fossil fuels and things like that. So I would say, yes, there are ways in which, from the grassroots side to the big denomination side, organizational side, there are ways that they look to protect the environment. So I hope that sort of answers the question.
Thanks so much, Joyce.
Sure.
And with this next question, I'll dedicate to Jenny. And they're kind of similar, actually. There are two questions that have come in, and they're both quite similar. And they're talking, one is from Reem, and she basically is mentioning this idea also that many of the messages that you've mentioned from the three faiths are all quite consistent in terms of climate protection. She says, however, I'm curious how you engage with the other end of the spectrum, especially people or groups of religions, to justify overconsumption or dismiss climate responsibility. So how do you approach conversations with climate deniers who frame their views through religious beliefs? And that's from Reem Jabr. But Courtney C actually has a very similar question, where she's also mentioning how do you approach those conversations with the skeptics of both climate and faith simultaneously, often due to exposure to despair and hardship due to systematically disproportionate impacts. So it's actually the same question, if you will, looking into how do we address climate deniers in that space. So Jenny, if you could address that question, that would be wonderful.
Excuse me. Excuse me. I'm not sure I'm understanding how this is different from the previous question about how do you address people who are skeptical about the climate crisis?
The question is, I think with Reem's case is that a lot of times people can actually use overconsumption to be justified using religious ethics and religious texts. So how do we go about also kind of disengaging from that space, and also understanding that we need to reinforce more positive narratives and correct narratives actually around faith when it comes to also climate. And so the question is then how do you actually approach not just climate skeptics, but those that are particularly using religious narratives and religious texts in an erroneous manner?
I'll be honest, I don't think that I have a lot of experience with this. I think that in the Jewish community, it's not that everybody is fully engaged, but I think there was, recently a study, I think like 85% of the American Jewish community is either concerned or very concerned about the climate crisis. So in my day-to-day work, the focus is much more on how do people actually engage with it and engage with it in a way that centers climate justice and that centers systemic responses and that gives people the space to grapple and be in community across faith groups and across communities. I also will just say more generally that I think, people use scripture to support all sorts of things. And I think that the question of values becomes really important. And what are the core kind of values that we come back to? And Kori, you spoke so beautifully about like what those are in Islam. And the kind of dignity, I would say in Judaism, the idea that every human being is created in the image of God, and thereby every human being, deserves to be treated with dignity, and that pursuing justice and equity becomes central. And so some of those core values, I think, become as important as the like ones that are specific to, environmental stewardship. I also think that there was an earlier question about, can you use scripture to like convince people of things? Or I don't remember quite how it was worded. And, with the caveat that it depends on the person, I have very, very rarely seen someone like read a verse and then like change their mind, or read a verse and then be like, okay, I've got to go get really involved. Like, I think it's often much more textured and nuanced than that. And it has a lot to do with community building as well. And what, how their community and the people around them are engaging, and whether they feel a sense of agency. So I think one of the things that we are often focused on is how do you support people to move from concern about climate to really accessing their sense of agency that we have to have an impact on the climate crisis. And I think faith communities have a really significant role to play in helping people to access that sense of both obligation and responsibility, and that sense of agency, and really being partners with God, which is another concept that is very deep in Jewish tradition. That it is not, in Deuteronomy, like lo b'shamayim hi, it is not just in the heavens, it's in your hands and in your heart, and you can do it.
Thank you so much. We're running out of time, but I'm actually going to pull in here on one of the questions as well, pulling in on that last point, which is this idea of communities and community work. A lot of what the three of you actually do is working with communities in disproportionate measures, whether it be through Black BIPOC communities. Kori, I know you work with Masjid Muhammad. Joyce, you work, which is a Black BIPOC community in the DC area. Joyce, you've worked with Black Methodist churches in Louisiana. Jenny, you've also worked with disproportionate communities across this idea of really looking into the vulnerable, the marginalized communities that really are most impacted, not just by climate change and environmental pollution and environmental racism on so many levels, but how can we also make sure that with what we bring from our faith-based communities as well, that we're able to help promote them in a sustainable way. If you can give a story or an anecdote to end from those specific communities that you all each work with, that are much more vulnerable and disproportionate, I think that that would be a wonderful ending to hear from the three of you. Joyce, we can start with you.
Okay, thank you. The group that I worked with in Louisiana was called the Concerned Clergy of Monroe. And it was a group of clergy that said, we want to be involved. We want to participate. This is after the historic floods that took place. And they were willing to work with governments, different levels of governments, not just the local, but the state, the federal level, national, so forth. So they expressed that. And that was really a very unique thing that occurred, I'm going to say, and that is to deal with disaster recovery. There are certain frameworks that are used, economics, housing, like education, financial. So this particular group of Concerned Clergy of Monroe, they modified their mission statements to be in line strategically with these elements in which we were going to deal with disaster recovery. They also connected with a university and developed a memorandum of agreement between the Concerned Clergy of Monroe and the university. And that memorandum of agreement understanding was also aligned. So can you imagine being aligned so you can now communicate across the national, state, and local and university levels that you were in line strategically to move forward to deal with long-term disaster recovery when after the emergency is over with, there are still many things that need to be attended to help the communities. So now you have a group that can speak and coordinate across different government agencies, something in which the clergy said early onset, we want to be a part, we want to participate, and was able to strategically align their work, their efforts across these different dynamics of policy and recovery and culture and natural resources. And so it was really a beautiful thing to see and how they were able to engage. So that's maybe a little different, but something I think was pretty insightful to be able to do and work with and come up with to work across these different domains and solidify that through an agreement process.
Wow, no, that's phenomenal. I think that that's exactly what we want to see, that community building aspect, and how can we really create change through community building. Thank you, Joyce. Jenny.
I'm thinking about line 3, the Enbridge line 3 going through Anishinaabe territory in what is Minnesota, and really resistance that was led by the tribes and Jewish climate activists and part of a multi-faith contingent that came led by the indigenous leaders to try to stop line 3. And it felt like a very, very powerful, not ultimately successful in the immediate term, but power building and powerful effort that was multi-faith in support of the tribes that were fighting for rights.
That's incredible, Jenny. Thank you for sharing that story. And I think that that's also a very big part of what we're trying to see is really building in as well on Indigenous knowledge and in these Indigenous communities to make sure that they're also heard as marginalized voices. When we think about faith, one of the things we also need to be mindful of is considering all faiths, tribal faiths, Indigenous faiths, all different kinds of faiths, to make sure that their voices are also included in this process as well. So thank you for that very much. So Kori, I'd love to hear as well from your perspective as well.
So when it comes to like working together, Rabbi Rosen, you said earlier, it's like all hands on deck. And that reminds me of a saying of the prophet where he kept on recommending that his companions treat their neighbors well, until they thought that he was going to make them treat them as like to inherit from them. So there's an intense what command, or yeah, a command to be good to your neighbors. And when your neighbors have rights over you. And there's another saying that this is like for Muslims in particular, anyone who believes in Allah and the last day should be good to their neighbors. So it's like Muslims, you want to do good? Be good to your neighbors. If you believe in Allah in the last day, be good to your neighbors. So the neighbors are people near and far, people that we can, that we have to work with, and grow with, and pray with, and all these things. So this command to be good to your neighbors is like an invitation for Muslims to reach out, collaborate, connect, and do good. Let's race together towards the good.
Thank you so much, Kori. Absolutely. That was wonderful. Thank you so much, everyone. Unfortunately, our time is up, although there's so many questions, and so this conversation could keep going over and on and on and on. I want to thank you, each one of you. This was a beautiful conversation. Thank you for all the attendees, all the questions. And I wish you all a wonderful, wonderful evening.